Welcome to the After Dark podcast, the podcast in which Anthony leads his unknowing friend Konrad by the hand through TV shows. Will Konrad like them? Will Konrad hate them? Will Konrad predict what's going to happen, or will he be lost in the dark? Find out now, only on the After Dark podcast.
Hello and welcome to the After Dark podcast. My name is Anthony James and that is Konrad.
Hello.
That's him. Well, Konrad, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm trying to think what has actually gone on this week. It's been a tumultuous week actually, because a website that I'm a big fan of has lost a lot of its key staff members.
Really?
It's been Giant Bomb lost several people, and it's been a very sad week. But apart from that, it's been good. I don't think anything significant has happened in my life apart from that.
That reminds me of the time where a big game that I play with friends is called Heroes of the Storm. Blizzard's what do you call it? MOBA.
MOBA.
Yeah. Well, it's it's sort of pseudo MOBA kind of. It is a MOBA, but we play that a lot. And about a year or two ago, they'd announced that half the staff are leaving, and they're going to divert all the staff to a different game. And we were like, no, game's dead. So that reminds me of that. Well, this week's been a really busy week for me because as well as all the stuff going on in real life, we got Dark Discussions done as well. There's been 1899 trailer released and casting announced. So I've been making videos on that. There's more videos coming. I'm obviously not going to be doing it would be stupid to do one a week for a year at this point. But anytime new stuff comes out, I will be making more. Ema's going to be doing some costume analysis, Konrad. So that'll be good fun. Obviously, you can't watch that video because you're going to be...
I'm not allowed to watch any of this, so I can't enjoy it.
Yeah.
I hope our listeners do.
Yeah, listeners will love it. But so you can't watch any of that. We will, because we will be doing it on the After Dark podcast eventually. So I'm just really, really excited about that. I think a lot of the, based on the view numbers and stuff, a lot of the subscribers are really excited about that show. And so that's been that. Really been loving that, Yeah.
I wonder if it's going to be about pirates. That's my.
Yeah, all you know is...
Were there still pirates in 1899? I don't know.
Well, there were still cowboys, so I'd say it's still pirates.
Sure.
There's still pirates today.
That is true. Yeah, there are still pirates today.
Yeah, just because they don't look like the film pirates doesn't mean they're not pirates.
No, they're less jolly now than they once were.
Less
an AK-47. Less parrots and peg legs.
Yeah.
More AK-47s and scary men.
Yeah, I am the captain now.
Yeah. So that's literally all I know about that show. In fact, I don't even know that. I'm assuming 1899 is a year, but when it comes to Baron Boyodor and Jan Fries, what is time, quite frankly? It could start in 1899 and we could be in the year 2200 by the time that show finishes its first season.
Yeah, exactly. And also, the name Dark from the first show, it talks about the lack of light, but that's not what it was about, because we could see what was happening on the screen, so it wasn't literally dark. So it might not literally be the year 1899.
No, it's a bad name when you actually think about it. Dark, and it had nothing to do with dark.
Yeah, it is a very bad name because we could see everything.
I could see everything.
Yeah. If you want, Game of Thrones battle in season 8, that was dark. We couldn't see anything there.
Yeah, that was a great. That was an excellent example of using dark to hide the fact that your budgetary constraints meant your fight was just a bunch of characters standing in corners groaning for half an hour.
Don't even get me started on that, Konrad. Ema worked for months and months and months on that, and then when the battle came out, she's like, I can't see a fucking thing. What's going on here?
And it just, listen, for the listeners at home, we're going to get into it, all right? Just bear with us for 1 second. We've started talking about Game of Thrones, but as a Total War fan, a fan of kind of military strategy, watching that, yes, the visual of the Dothraki just riding off into a horde of zombies looked nice, but it's right up there with the fucking elves jumping over the shield wall in the third Hobbit movie to absorb a charge. Where it's no, the point of a shield wall is to take the charge. Don't jump over it and get yourselves killed. And in that, the Dothraki are fucking light cavalry. Don't charge them head first into a horde of zombies. They're supposed to be on the outside, picking them off. Just I love Game of Thrones, and I'm one of the big defenders of some of those later seasons. There is good in there, but fuck me, that battle, I was just okay.
Yep, it was pretty bad. I think we talked about that battle a little bit as well in our Jon Snow episode.
I believe we did. Yeah, we should do another one of those.
Yeah, we should do another one of those at some point. We'll find another avenue for them now. I think After Dark Podcast has got its thing we do now. We do our shows. We sort of got other podcasts to do other things, and but yeah, we definitely have a lot of opinions on Game of Thrones. So anyway, this week's episode of Game of Thrones, the OA, is is really good too. So we'll get into it. Second last one, Konrad. We only got one more to go.
I know. I can't believe it. And with the way this episode has gone, there might this is a very tenuous link, but there might be some way to kind of get the 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon from the OA to Game of Thrones, because there's some stuff that's discussed in this episode that makes me think that there might be a link between Game of Thrones and the actual OA, like the stuff that's happening in the OA.
Okay. All right. Okay.
We'll get that'll become clear when we get to it.
Excellent. Okay, great. Right, guys, subscribe on audio apps and on YouTube, The Culture Cave on YouTube. Send us an email, adpodmail@gmail.com, if you want to get in touch with us. And if you want to ask Konrad a question, you could put a comment underneath this video, under the pinned comment. A few questions for you again, Konrad, today, so that's great. If you want to support the channel, you can either just tip us. We don't ask you to do that, but if you want to, you can. You can also buy a t-shirt, which are in the link below in the description. If you want to join the Discord for Dark Chat, OA Chat, Movie Chat, or 1899 Chat, or even just general chat, who knows?
Just chat.
Just jump on in. The water's fine. Come on in, the water's fine. That's the saying, but I said jump on in because that's what I'm going to do now. Let's jump into it, Konrad.
Let's jump in.
Oh, let's break it down!
The episode opens with Kareem Washington bringing in the big guns, even the racist guy, and
the big
coming
dogs
into the house. I don't know why Kareem didn't realize that you need to go in the house. He figured this out already. You have to go in the house the particular way, but no, he thinks maybe because he's already been in the house, it'll just look the same. But he goes in, and things aren't as they seem when they get in there.
Yeah, well, I think, to be honest, it kind of sets up the stall for Kareem's mind space throughout this episode, that he is continuously rejecting what he has seen because he doesn't want to accept it. So this is an obvious first case where it's like, you know that you came into this house once before. It was fairly mundane. Obviously, he ran into the kid who threw himself out the window.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was structurally the house made sense kind of structurally. And then he came in through the tunnel shaped like a coffin, and the gloves were off, everything was crazy. So he knows in his heart of hearts that this isn't going to work and he's not going to find what he's looking for here. Which is why I think the performance from Kingsley Ben-Adir as they progress into the house and we see the doll's, I don't want to say a doll's house, the little kind of model of the house isn't on the table, and the door in the passageway underneath the bed has been bricked up. He's not as shocked as he would be if he was genuinely expecting it to work. It's more kind of like or my read of it was that it was more of like a resignation of sort of, shit. Like, it was a long shot calling the police. I was kind of hoping that the house would just open itself up to them, and as it turns out, it didn't.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit of a damp squid. Say that. No.
Sure.
Damp octopus, old night. But yeah, I think like he went there and it didn't work, and I think this is the point where he starts really questioning what he saw. Because we know he's come back now, not in his mind under the influence, because we find out later that he could have had, very soon we find out actually, that there was like a poisonous gas that is sort of, it makes you hallucinate. So this is the beginning of him questioning that. And I think it's very believable, the road that he goes down in this episode.
Definitely.
So they go back outside, and, they don't go back outside, sorry, the camera does, and Prairie's sleeping underneath the tree. And she wakes up.
Yeah, just wakes up in a park. Looks like she is doing, and I hate to use this term because I feel like it's very kind of like a weighted, gendered term. But she wakes up and looks like she's doing the walk of shame. I think to everyone around her, kind of the dress from the night before. Get some strange looks. The thing that really struck me about this particular scene is that the eye keychain comes back. Obviously, that becomes a key part, and I use that word deliberately.
And also that eye keychain is open. The eye is always open, so it's hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, but I'd honestly forgotten about that until this episode. Okay. I kind of, it's one of those things that I'd noticed when it first turned up in Nina's hands in the first episode, and I'd written it down, and then it hasn't really come back since then. So seeing it again, I was like, okay, that's going to be important this episode, but I had no idea where it was going to go. And in the end, it turns out to be actually fairly mundane, but it's an interesting journey to get there.
Yeah. We'll talk about when we get there. But the video that's on it is pretty cool, I thought. Which we'll talk about when we get there. So she gets up, does a sort of little walk of shame sort of thing. Then the next scene, we get Kareem going to the hospital to visit Zendaya. I can't remember Zendaya's character's name. I apologize for that.
No, I can never remember her name, unfortunately.
Yeah, we actually found out her last name here too because they called her Miss something, but I can't even remember that. So Zendaya basically wants to go back into the house. She's annoyed at Kareem for taking her out, and even though she knew about the idea of this poisonous gas or this hallucinogenic gas because the Native Americans would have went into trances with it and things like this. And so it was always Pierre Ruskin knew when he built the house or when he bought the house that it was built on this site, So what do you think about her mentality here?
Well, so I think that there's one interesting thing that I wanted to mention here, which is that maybe this is me reading far too much into Zendaya's physical performance here, but when Kareem walks into the room, she's doing something really weird with her right hand. She's kind of like, she's doing like, I'll do it to the camera, she's doing like this with her right hand. Maybe she's just flexing, maybe it's just a choice on Zendaya's part, but it felt very pronounced to me that she felt like she was kind of doing something with her hands. And in the show about weird movements with hands, it stuck out to me. But maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree there. In terms of her mentality, I think what I said in the previous episode was, it was the one before this, wasn't it? Because we were with the boys and BBA in the last episode. And the episode before last, that the seed in the ear to me is both a literal and metaphorical representation of an individual's relationship with the house. Okay. So it is clearly literally doing something, as we'll find out later in this episode, because Hap is up to his old ear tricks again. Not to give too much away.
I noticed that.
Got some things to say about.
Talk about hiding clues in the imagery there, eh?
Bloody hell.
Looked like a little earbud too, didn't it?
Someone needs to sit down and have a word with Hap, seriously. But it's also metaphor, I think, for by being exposed to whatever is in this house, it has literally and symbolically planted a seed in these people's brains where they will never be able to let it go. And Zendaya seems to confirm that here, that even though she clearly very nearly died in the house, she is determined to go back, and I suspect will maybe she won't go back in this season, but I suspect had it continued, she probably would have gone back, and I don't think it would have ended that well for her because she has a very kind of devil-may-care attitude towards her own safety. Yeah.
I know. I really like your analysis there of the seed within the head and planting the seed. I think that's great. Awesome. So Nina,
I just wanted to say one more thing as well. Actually, sorry, I completely forgot this, but Kareem, he's looking for an excuse here as to the hallucinogenic gas. But it's like, the gas didn't make him imagine a psychic octopus. Admittedly, he didn't know it was psychic.
Something's
he just
going
saw
on
a big
here.
octopus. But I mean, come on, Kareem. It's not just the house. You've seen some other stuff going on here as well.
Also, he had the dream where he saw Prairie in his dream before he went to the house for the first time.
Yeah, I like the fact that the show is very clearly saying this character is reaching for excuses to dismiss what he has seen, but at the same time clearly disputing it and saying, no, he's talking nonsense. There might be some hallucinogenic gas here, maybe that's partially what's dangerous about the house, but there is clearly more at play here than just people having hallucinations.
Exactly. So Nina's doorman / security guard, I think it's the doorman, comes and picks her up, and there's been a break-in at her house actually, and they were looking for something. We find out that, well, I'm pretty sure it's sort of concluded that they were looking for the memory pen, which is hidden within that eye, hidden in plain sight, so to speak.
Yes.
And so the memory pen, they get it, right? First of all, okay, we've talked a little bit about the fact that you thought this was going to be important. When it was revealed to be a memory pen, what did your mind immediately think? What is on that memory pen?
I mean, memory sticks in any kind of modern visual media will either contain plans to something like a nuke that's going to be used in like Mission Impossible,
Yeah.
or an incriminating video. That's the only two things. It's never like the backups of The Sopranos season 1 to 5 that you just.
I would love that
put on
if on the memory pen there was the video, but there was also like a file saying The Sopranos.
Yeah. Listen, like she wanted to take it round to her friend's house, and it was the only thing she had to hand. It happens. It happens to all of us.
It does.
Yeah, that would have been very funny, but unfortunately, it's not that. I mean, there are videos on it, but it's of old Marlo Rhodes.
Marlo
Is that her
Rhodes,
name?
and
Marlo.
yeah, and also Michelle Vu.
Yes, and Michelle Vu. So, so there's to kind of talk through my impression of this scene as it was going. The first thing that I noted was we've had three characters come looking for her. Her boyfriend has come looking for her, so obviously Pierre Ruskin, a tall man with dark hair who I interpreted to be Hap, and another dark-haired man, not so tall, who I interpreted to be Homer.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's my interpretation of who those characters are. Which and I very much enjoyed the irony of her saying that her real boyfriend didn't come to see her when he actually did, because Homer, if I'm correct, Homer was one of the people.
But
who
also
came
the
looking
doorman, didn't he say something like, it was her boyfriend, but then later on said another fella who also could have been her boyfriend. So it was even he could see from, maybe if that was Homer visiting, he could see from him that there was some connection between them.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's really interesting the way this doorman character is played, because he's almost like a father figure to Nina.
Yeah.
I think that it's very deliberately set up to show that Nina is a loner, in that the person in her life who is most familiar with her seems to be the doorman in her apartment block. It's a very kind of sad state of existence, and I think that's compounded when they walk into her apartment, and the first thing when it becomes clear that it's been ransacked, the first thing he says is, "Oh my God, Nina." He drops the kind of pretense of being formal with her and calling her Miss Azarova and calls her Nina, which suggests a level of familiarity that we haven't really seen from him before. And I think that's a really, really cool bit of characterization for these two, just because if what happens at the end of this episode for the OA is semi-permanent, it implies there's going to be perhaps quite a painful existence that we're going to see some of with as regards to Nina Azarova and the relationships in her life. The only other thing I really wanted to mention from this scene is I really like the imagery of kind of nature creeping into Nina's apartment. I think that's very, very deliberate. There's like projections of trees on walls, there's plants very explicitly in all the shots, and I think it's just symbolism for where the OA is and what she has experienced, but I enjoyed it from a visual standpoint.
Yeah, I did too. I love the fact that in her apartment, like, it's a real, I don't know how to explain it, but real contemporary, I suppose. The idea of having like a bit of art in her house that's projected on a wall.
Yeah, it was really weird. I've never seen that before, but I did enjoy it. I mean, whenever I see something like that, it makes me think, when you're going to bed and you're sort of turning off all the lights and everything, that's got to be a pain, having to go through like, I forgot the projector, I'll just leave it on.
Well, it made me think that she's someone of very high class, very, very in tune with the arts, maybe, like, because it felt like to me like an installation. When you go to like a modern museum of art, and they have like, that's the sort of thing they have like they'll have like a place where you go in the room and it's just like a blank room with something projected on the wall. Yeah,
could easily be. And I think the impression I've had of Nina, based on how people have described her, is that she is a woman who is a fan of the arts,
woman of culture.
Woman of culture.
That's why we talk about it here on the Culture Cave. That's just a little that's a little plug. I'm going to use that for the channel trailer. Okay, so
nice.
Next scene. After we've sort of found out, we'll find out more about the memory pen later. But in the next scene, Hap goes round to Homer, and Homer's doing some chin-ups. Very good on him. He can do that. Good on him. And Hap is chatting to him. And yeah, what do you think of this scene?
Okay, so listeners, I was going to say long-term listeners, but it was only 2 episodes ago. Longer-term listeners will know that a few episodes back, I think it was actually about 3 or 4 episodes ago, in the episode where we first met Old Knight, and the OA goes into a seemingly different world where it's shot with a handheld camera and approaches a blonde-haired woman on a plane from behind.
Yeah.
My theory there was that the woman she was approaching was actually Brit Marling, and that was the real world in the kind of multi-dimension sense. And this scene is just absolutely full of dialogue that basically confirms that that's where they were going to go with this. I don't know if I'd be very surprised if we're going to get confirmation of this. But so they're discussing Scott's NDE, and it soon becomes clear why Hap is so interested in it. First off, Scott has said that that there's he talks about her being called Bryn or something, which sounds an awful lot like Brit. There were blinding lights everywhere, very much like set lights. There were cameras in the air above them, very much like they were filming something. And Hap was there, but he had a British accent, almost as if he was Jason Isaacs. And I think I'm fascinated to see, or not see, I guess, as the case may be, where this would have gone. Because to me, from Hap's point of view, this is him pursuing a world where he and the OA have a good relationship with each other, where like, this is once again, to me, Hap running away from the repercussions of his actions, trying to find a world where he and this woman that he is linked to by some phantom thread, where he's able to like build the relationship he desires with her, and it seems to me that this is a world that he would like to travel to very soon. I don't think he's going to get there because
it did
mention
that Hap kissed Prairie,
yes.
the OA. So what do you take from that? Because obviously, if you are talking about real life, Jason Isaacs and Brit Marling aren't together.
Well, they were filming, so I think they were filming a show in which their characters kissed, and then they stopped filming. Gotcha. And so I think the implication is they are both acting in a show. Maybe they are filming the OA in another world. That would be incredibly meta and fun if they went to another universe where the OA is a TV show about the real stuff that's actually happening, and we could just get lost in a endless loop of that nature. But I think that seems so explicit from this scene that's where they were going to go. Okay. And it makes me quite sad because I don't think we're going to get any resolution for this at all.
Well, obviously, yeah, it's cancelled after 2 seasons, so we're not going to get much resolution. There's a lot I want to say to that, but I'm afraid of saying anything, to be honest with you. And it's a real shame because I've got a lot of points in my mind right now that I want to talk about, but I think I'm going to have to wait a week to talk about them, just to sort of put the ducks in a row of what's, so we're both seeing the same amount of stuff in the show. I don't want the listeners to think I'm leading you down a certain way. But there are things that even from what you're saying, I don't want to make you believe what you're saying is true, but my mind's already sparking off on a load of different directions. So just to give a crumb of one thing I'm thinking about, right? So
okay, give me a crumb.
Okay, I've mentioned before that this is something that we're going to do in the episode after episode 8. So when we do the Theory Matrix, we'll also be talking about theories from fans and stuff about things maybe would have happened moving forward. But we're also going to talk about all the different times that the show nearly came out. Like, there's been rumors that the show would come back, right? So basically, that made me think at this point, right? You saying that, and I'm thinking about like the show being cancelled. You saying that, it's funny to me because let's say if it was going to go that way, say if it was going to go to that length where they do go to that place, right? If it did go there in season 3 or wherever, right? My mind is shot off into the direction of, if they did do that, and then the characters went into the world, right? And there's already been mention that the OA will sort of have to be reawakened, and that's what she reawakened herself, right? Yeah. So my idea would be that if they did go that way in the 3rd season, then what would Hap want to do? He would want to make. So let's say that it was like they were making the OA in season 3. In that, what would he want to do? He would want, in the real world, as Jason Isaacs, to have the show cancelled, because that would mean that she would no longer be in that role, and she wouldn't be able to reawaken herself.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great point. We should keep an eye on Jason Isaacs.
Yeah.
Is it all a massive performance piece? Like they're just, the OA is actually happening all around us as we speak.
Well, again, we'll talk about, there's a load of stuff we can talk about in terms of will the show come back, all the different like sort of theories and things about it maybe coming back at some point based on loads of stuff. But there's definitely a lot to talk about there. But that's a little grain of sort of that for the listeners and for you about.
That's very fascinating. Yeah, to think about what the implications of the show being cancelled are to the narrative of the show, because it does actually work into it. Makes me wonder whether when they started writing this, they had some inkling that Netflix might not be renewing them for a third season. They're just like, I'll tell you what, this will shit them up at Netflix exchange.
Well, again, we're having this conversation 2 weeks too early because nothing's confirmed. But if in season 3 they did do that, it makes me think, to be honest with you, like there was a whole thing #SaveTheOA going on, right? And it made me think to myself, if that's where they were going to go, then maybe their plan was to have the show cancelled, leave it for a few years, and the #SaveTheOA movement is what awakens her.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I think that like that level of kind of external creativity. I can't believe that anyone would go to that effort to do something that isn't making anyone any money. But at the same time, I love that theory. I choose to believe that's true.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll be sitting here like 30 years' time waiting for season 3.
So, yeah, any minute now.
Yeah. All right, okay, so let's move on with the story then. So we got...
Okay.
Obviously, there's been a lot of... it's been very subtle. But we have talked before about there been like some noir references in this show.
Oh, right? yeah, I know exactly where you're going with it.
So this moment where she comes to Cream's boat in through the circle window with the thing overhead and the glasses, 100%. This is the most overt reference, isn't it?
I creased up when I saw her hair. It's just like, Jesus Christ, you're like trying to do like a Faye Dunaway in Chinatown kind of impersonation near the OA. Just like no one dresses like this anymore. You're making yourself more conspicuous by dressing up like a femme fatale from the 50s, but it was a great look.
I loved it.
A big fan of it. I think there's one thing obviously to get out of the way early in this scene. It's one of those things that I didn't actually write down initially because I thought, well, that's pretty obvious, but I think it bears mentioning here just in case anyone didn't spot it, which is that obviously Kareem is looking at a missing persons list, and on that list are Steve, French, and Jesse. So that seems to be confirmation of why it's not safe for them to travel, because... Well,
if they're missing, what's your theories on that then? Because it would seem like that it would imply that there's some connection between because we've already been told this, that they're all connected in the different, like there's echoes of universes, and so they're all connected. So would that imply that they're missing because of the same reason, or how? What do you mean?
I don't know actually, like because I don't think. I didn't notice Michelle on that list, which to me, I'm just trying to think through in my head whether I might have just missed Michelle on that list, but to me, there seems to be a distinction between Steve, French, and Jesse and their position on that list when compared to what we saw happen to Michelle, which is her traversing the rose window and collapsing, very similar to how, and that is actually in this scene, in the Marlowe Rhodes video, we see her collapsing very much in a similar way to how Elodie collapsed when she travelled as well. So my read for Michelle is that she has left her body behind and travelled somewhere else via the rose window. I don't know if I think that that's what Steve, Jesse, and French have gone through. Although, having said that, I mean, Buck was included in the group who were told it's not safe for you to travel. So, I guess it stands to reason that Steve, Jesse, and French
are in a similar state.
Are in a similar state, yeah. So maybe they've gone as well, and they're. So I'm just working this through in my head now. Obviously, we see what's happened to Michelle by the end of this episode. I wonder if Steve, Jesse, and French are there as well, thinking about it.
In Pierre Ruskin's place.
Yeah. Or certainly, I mean, we've seen what Hap and Pierre Ruskin do to the people who are kind of taken by the house.
Okay.
So I guess my suspicion would be they're either in Pierre Ruskin's place or they are in Hap's lab being
Behind that locked
analysed. Yeah, one of the two.
Do you think we are going to find out what's behind that locked door in the next episode?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that this episode because, in fact, this episode and in previous episodes, because obviously when we first see Rachel react with horror to the pool, I don't know if it's a pool, but there's water reflecting on the wall behind her. Yeah. It made me think, there's going to be some like crazy like space monster like fish thing in there, and then we got the octopus. But I wonder if there's like actually just rows and rows of bodies of kids who have travelled in there or something like that. It's like because the idea of keeping people underwater to or certainly submerging their heads to allow the seed to bloom has been revisited so many times in that particular laboratory that seems like it's maybe more likely the direction that they're heading in with that, rather than there being some crazy squid in there. Or another octopus, I guess. But I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I'm gonna go for that over the octopus or another octopus in there now, just because I think another octopus reveal would be a bit like it's old hat. We've seen the octopus, guys. Come on.
Yeah. We've already had an octopus.
But I do think I do think we're gonna see that. I can't believe they're gonna get to the end of this season without them showing us what Hap has in that room.
Okay. Yeah. It would make sense, wouldn't it? Because the first season was very much that dimension. This season's very much this dimension. You would imagine the third season's going to be a different dimension. If you would think about for the first season, we've sort of said was Rachel's NDE dimension. This season has been Homer's. So next season, it would seem where they're pointing at is we're going to go to Scott's, which possibly, based on the current information, might be ours.
Yeah. The more I think about that, like Scott's NDE dimension being ours, where the OA is a TV show that's been cancelled, and then Prairie's and which presumably let's say the final season in the plan would have been Prairie's, just because Prairie's like the main character, so it would make sense.
Would have been
that Prairie's
Saturn.
Being like in space. It's just like this. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall in the pitch meeting for like a third season if they did get one with Netflix, being like, listen, okay, third season. It's going to be like a 3-camera sitcom. We're going to have canned laughter. It was basically going to be like a WandaVision style thing. And then I don't know what the fourth one would have been, because I guess we haven't really. I'm trying to think if Renata's described.
Renata's one. We didn't have too much details about Renata's one, to be honest.
Yeah, that would have been good. Whatever it would have been. If the third one is like a sitcom and the fifth one is in space, Renata's could be literally anything. It's pick a genre. A horror movie. Make it like a horror movie. That'd be great.
Yeah, exactly. We do know that Renata's did have a cartoon-style mentor. We know that about it. So possibly it's a little bit further off now, but I've got it in my mind now. So we are talking about this, in terms of the fifth season. So I want to say this, right? There's a short story by Isaac Asimov, which I mentioned I would put into the. I said I would put into the description of one of the podcasts. I think it was a Sisyphus one. But anyway. There's an Isaac Asimov short story, which I can't remember the name of, but basically it's the story of a person who has died, and then they get sent back to Earth to relive as a different person, and then this sort of spirit or like God or whatever you want to say is talking to them, is saying, you go and you have to live every single life that has ever lived on Earth. You are everyone. You live every life. And only once you've done that, you become one of us, right? So the idea is that you sort of once you've had the experience of living everyone's life, then you become like this God being, something like that. And that's sort of where I'm feeling this show would be going to season 5. In my mind, I'm sort of viewing it as Elodie says to the OA in this episode that she has a lot. She has faith in her, or we'll get to the exact quote later on, but she has faith in her, or she thinks like she can go far, right? And I think to myself, is like the idea is that maybe she's like been earmarked. Like we were talking, maybe she's like a fallen angel, or maybe she's actually God and stuff. I think she might just have been earmarked as sort of like she's going through the process of becoming something bigger. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's. I think that the thing with this show that I find really fascinating is that they've thrown out so many threads that I feel like they're not going to follow all of them. So like the original Angel stuff, like the BBA stuff, the little girl who spoke to the cops wife when she was younger and told her to wait for Prairie and Homer to turn up at the end of season 1. Katoon. There's so many little like narrative threads that they've thrown out that they could follow. And yeah, as you say, this idea that she is being prepped for something greater, it could really be arrived at by any one of those threads, which is what I find so fascinating, this idea that they might all converge at some point in the future. Obviously it doesn't seem like that's going to happen, but I think definitely that read of it, that Prairie is positioned as very important to the narrative and the scale that we're now dealing with, particularly in regards to the people who are speaking to Prairie, so like Elodie and Katoon. It seems weird for like a human, just a regular human, to have any importance whatsoever now that we're dealing with kind of multiverse theory. So yeah, I think there is obviously some significance to her in a cosmic sense, and I would love to have found out what that significance was.
Yeah, and just one last point about the future of the show that we're not going to see, but I thought of how to... Well, maybe we will one day, the whole cancellation theories is correct. But another thing that, like, we were told that, like, 2 people healed Scott, right? Or brought him back to life. 5 people can make you travel. It made... And maybe the introduction of these little machines means that's not going to go this way. But I kind of, in my mind, was, like, envisioning a 5th season or something where they have to, like... do something like get a stadium full of people, or like everyone on Earth has to like almost give Goku power for the spirit bomb.
I believe I did literally mention like the Goku spirit bomb against Boo.
Exactly. So I do feel that there could have been some room for that sort of thing. I think I mentioned it before, but some room for like having a fuckload of people doing the movements at the same time, which could like reorder the universe or something. You know what I mean?
Or like Unicron from the Transformers turns up and he's going to eat Earth, and Prairie needs to stop it by gathering the energy of the entire universe to defeat Unicron. I'd have been very into that.
Yeah, or like Hap ends up being like the smoke monster in Lost, and just like he's like the personification of evil, and you have to do the things to like just like get rid of him. But okay,
that'd be great.
Well, there we go. Let's move on. And we got Marlo Rhodes. She shows us the video. She actually is talking about that she left and it turned into what she didn't want it to become, and then she shows the video of Michelle Vu looking through the rose window and falling down into what we can assume is like a coma because of what Elodie said. Okay, so what was your take on this? You've already spoke about it a little bit, but
I mean, I think this is the fact. There's very clear lines of comparison between what happened to Elodie when she travelled and what happens to Michelle here. So and also what was described as happening to the engineer 2 episodes ago. This sort of they were exposed to the rose window and were then in a comatose state for the rest of their life. And to me that implies that they have travelled elsewhere. The interesting thing to me is this idea that when you travel into someone's being, they are, well, I guess they're suppressed if you want to suppress them, or as Nina or as Prairie and Elodie discuss in this episode, it is possible to kind of merge with them and allow them to be part of your consciousness. So this idea that these kids are going into this comatose state, and the engineer maybe implies that when you leave these bodies, the kind of remnant of the individual that was kind of that was quashed. Actually, no, that doesn't make sense. I was just thinking through that as I was saying it. So there is no one else in Michelle's body here, and in the engineers presumably when this happened to him. So this is just them leaving a body behind, I guess, which maybe implies that Buck, that there's room in Michelle's body for Buck to travel into it. I'll be interested to see if anything comes of that, actually.
Well, they can be in the same body at the same time, but I know what you mean now that it's vacant.
But it's just vacant, it's sitting there unoccupied.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so next up we get some more of Kareem, and they watch the video, they go back, and there's another thing. It makes me think at this point, Kareem Kareem is really starting to question what he's seen. He's like whenever Prairie says I'm from another dimension, I can really see Kareem being like, oh yeah, I've just remembered I got this woman from a mental institution.
yeah. I feel this is very believable, his skepticism here. So literally the USB key was presented to them on a silver platter, and then the fact that the OA appears to be kind of conjuring forth this like plot critical or investigation critical information at exactly the right moment, paired with him already kind of trying to reject everything he's seen because he doesn't want to accept it, makes his skepticism very believable. And I think this is maybe what the trees were speaking about when they're saying that Prairie is going to lose faith in herself, and I think part of that is Kareem also losing faith in her, which is going to ultimately lead to her to something potentially bad happening to her. And it will be compounded in some way by Hap. I'm not sure what that's going to be yet, but Hap's always involved.
Yeah, he is always involved. I also like the line at the very end of the scene, whenever it actually turns out to be a bit of a clue once you finish the episode, but then she says to him, like, yeah, that's your problem, you're looking for a body. Obviously at the time, if you're just thinking like a detective show, it's like you would imagine, like, you look for someone who's dead, but she's actually still alive. But I think that at the end of this episode, you can sort of see what she meant. It's like, we are a consciousness within the body. The body might still be here, but she might not be.
You're not going to find what you're looking for. Going after Pierre Ruskin. Although I mean, speaking of, well, yeah, or I guess he will. It's a lot. It's probably
Michelle,
a lot easier.
the Shell. Come on, give it to me.
I mean, it'll be well done. It'll be a lot easier for him to explain to his racist cop friends that it's just like, yeah, Michelle's here, I don't know, she's in a coma, investigation done, than it would be to say Michelle is here, but her consciousness isn't. It has travelled to another dimension, so we need to keep looking and form some kind of interdimensional police task force to track her down. Having said that, that would have been good.
Us talking about Michelle's consciousness traveling into another dimension, and you've started theorizing that the other dimension could be our dimension in some way.
Yeah.
That throws up a huge amount of questions and dramatic themes that they could go for in season 3 with the actor Ian Alexander. Because imagine Ian Alexander has come out as trans, is living his life as trans, and then all of a sudden, from a different universe, the female version, like Michelle, is in his mind now.
Yeah, I was thinking that during this episode, actually, both for the actor himself and for the implications for the character. So obviously, phenomenal performance from the actor to be able to conjure these feelings of like identity, a gender identity within these characters without it being hurtful to the actor, because that must have been a very difficult thing to go through.
Well, I have said before that he views Michelle as pre-transition, like he doesn't view Michelle as just being female,
But I mean, even just to be able to kind of to relive those experiences must have been quite difficult for him, and a great performance like on that basis alone. But as you say, to then be able to explore the implications of how you perceive your own gender, in light of different personalities or different souls or whatever you want to call it inhabiting the same body. There's a huge amount that can be explored in Buck or Michelle or Ian Alexander's character there. That I would have absolutely loved to have seen that, because this is one of the most interesting trans characters I think I've ever. And it's a tragedy to say there really aren't that many trans characters in mainstream media. Full stop. So it's not a long list to pick from. But this is easily one of the most interesting depictions of a trans character I've ever seen in a show, and I would have loved to have seen it explored further in different dimensions.
Yep, I agree with you. All right, okay. I have a grain of hope in me, to be honest with you. So every time we say that's the whole way through as well, say it's cancelled, in my little I'm just like no. One day, even if it's like they release graphic novels or something, one day we'll have the story fulfilled.
What we need to do is get to 1 million subscribers and then leverage all of those subscribers to be like, look, we will all watch this, so you need to make this again, please.
Yeah, exactly. Well, guys, there we go. Hit the subscribe button.
Yeah.
We'll get the OA remade. Put it on our shoulders. We can carry the burden.
Get Brit/Bryn on the podcast, and we'll flesh out the details.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Actually, it's funny as well. It goes again. We're going to talk about this another. It goes to the level. Literally goes to the level that Brit was putting up things. Like we have to move on from the show, and can you stop talking about it? It hurts us at all. And everyone was just like, that's what she would say if she.
Yeah, that's great. She's made a rod for her own back here. Like, she's never going to be rid of it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so she rings up Sisygy, and she's coming tonight.
I was surprised she was welcome, to be honest. I was like, is the implication? I mean, we don't really see that much of it, but is the implication here that they found another psychic octopus?
Yeah, well, there was a lot of people in the comments saying, there's no way that octopus is dead. It's like, well, they said it was dead. It's dead. That's how TV works, right? So, yeah. It is dead. Unfortunately, no matter how much cutting off a tentacle wouldn't seem like a kill it, it did kill it. But when she gets there, when she gets there, the guy who she talks to when she's there actually explains why she's able to go with no octopus, and he said, like, whenever you came here and started acting out and describing your dreams. Yeah, so that's her main thing. Every now and then, obviously, she'll get Old Night to connect with her and commune with her. But it implied that her main thing was that she would have told the dreams that she had.
Yeah, Old Night was like the kind of support act.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, that's what the tapes are. Like, that's what the recordings are. It's her explaining her dreams. All right, so then she's gone. We'll catch up with that later. Hap gets Scott up into his office, lets him go. Well, actually, it's not just lets him go out of the restraints. Actually says to him, tomorrow I'm going to let you go. This was real manipulative once we see where this goes.
Hap is, in this scene, as full of shit as I think I've ever seen him be. So his basically reasoning to Scott that he's happy to let him go because he's done with the movements, which I guess is true. In a manner of speaking, and that they cause too much pain, and that he's just going to stay here because he likes it here.
Yeah,
it's just like, fuck you, Hap.
Interesting
like,
work to be done.
Yeah, okay. Like, I believe that Scott believes him, but at the same time, between this and Homer earlier in the episode, kind of asking Hap about Rachel, which we didn't really spend too much time on because there's not that much to discuss on it. But he says, "Oh yeah, she did die, and she slit her own throat," and then Homer. Not following it up with "I want to see the body." Yeah. That was frustrating, and then Scott accepting Hap's offer here is just it's believable, but he's such a wanker. Yeah. I just I want him to get his comeuppance, and it's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. But I liked the little bit of Scott like agreeing to do it so Renata would go free. It wasn't enough for him just to leave by himself.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like Scott should have, when Hap was like, "Oh, I'm going to be releasing you tomorrow, so you can go to the cops if you want," that should have set alarm bells off in Scott's head that, like, there's no way he's letting me go to the cops, so something's happening to me to stop this from happening.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Hey, Konrad.
Hi.
Guess what?
What?
Marlo Rhodes is dead.
Yep. Couldn't have seen that coming.
Yeah, she's dead. This actor, I really like this actress. I've only seen her in two things. I saw her in this, and I saw her in Devs. And in Devs, she also plays like a college professor talking about weird stuff like that.
She's in like some British police procedural that I've seen a couple of episodes of, I think.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember what it was called, but yeah, that's the only other thing I've seen her in. But yeah, she's really, really good. And it was a shame we didn't get to see that much of her, but she went to I'm trying to remember the expression now. It's something like you go to bed with the devil, you wake up with go to bed with dogs, wake up with fleas. That's what it is. And the fleas in this case are getting shot in the head in a staged suicide. Or I interpreted this as a staged suicide.
Well, he says she killed herself.
Oh yeah, he does, doesn't he? Yeah, of course. So despite the front door being broken,
yeah, no,
it's
like, do
people normally break their front doors before committing suicide? But yeah, she got unfortunately.
She got. Yeah, so obviously the details of that come out with the Pierre Ruskin chat later on. So Prairie puts on the Nina makeup.
Yep.
And this is a bit out of joint, I think, disjointed, but we'll go with it, I think, anyway now. So she basically wants to reawaken Nina, is what she wants to do. And Actually, no. Sorry. Before she does that, she talks to Elodie. Okay, yeah. So she puts on the stuff. She goes down and talks to Elodie. So let's have a chat about the Elodie stuff now. So she goes down to Sisygy, talks with the fella who says about her being a bit of a nutcase. She was up on the tables dancing, but she was a pain in his ass. But that was only until then she started making him money. So now he doesn't mind about that. Elodie is here. She talks about the idea of integrating into the person you're with. And I love this dichotomy between the two, because we've been talking about Prairie having a little lack of empathy towards Nina, to be honest. And Elodie's like, no, we become one. I want to experience. I don't want to. It's horrible to push them away. And Prairie's like, you should care about other people.
It's like, that's needlessly cruel, I think is what she says. And then like Prairie's like, shit. Oh yeah, I guess Nina probably would like to get out of the box that I've put her in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just like it's like in the film Get Out, like in the
absolutely. Yeah, the
sunken place.
Sunken place. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So basically, Elodie says that you can't escape Hap. Hap, Homer, and you are like a cosmic family. So there's these echoed realities where you'll always be together. Everything is connected. So when Prairie met Buck, that was probably around the same time that Michelle started playing the game and stuff like that.
Yeah.
To leave an echo, we learn, is very dangerous. So the idea of going to a universe or reality where you aren't connected to Hap and Homer in this way, that would be very dangerous. Hap. So basically, Elodie as well is a creature of balance. So she had to give Hap something, so gave him the inkling of those little machines. So that she could give the OA something at the same time. And the thing she gave OA was to just tell her, you need to go back to the time of your greatest trauma to free Nina Azarova and integrate with her. Basically saying, this is what you need to do. So it's interesting, the idea of having to give Hap something so that she could give her that bit of information. Creature of balance, I suppose. Okay, so there's a lot there, Konrad. What do you want to talk about in this scene?
Okay, so like the first thing that bears mentioning, just because it's a little aside, but it's a lovely bit of production design, is the dancers in Sisygy are wearing masks that are very reminiscent of the actual like biblical description of angels. So they're like multiple wings, multiple eyes, multiple mouths, very kind of like alien and quite horrific appearances. But I just quite enjoyed that as a little kind of throwaway moment of art direction that I enjoyed.
That's cool.
Elodie shows up. The first thing that the Russian guy says to her is, "Oh, you're French?" And she goes, well, I've travelled a lot," which is a great little response from Elodie there. I feel like she was pleased with herself for that one. And then she says to Prairie, or rather Prairie says to her, "Who are you?" And she responds with, "You know," which I've theorized before that I think Elodie might be Katoon. And I think that to me was as strong an indication that that's correct as we've had thus far in the show. The fact that she is implying that Prairie has met her before seems to point me in that direction.
Yeah, or definitely like a being like Katoon anyway.
Yeah. And so this idea of bonds existing across dimensions, these echoes that bind us together, certainly makes sense in the context of what we've seen with like the boys in BBA, and this idea that and the captives obviously in the mine as well. This idea that you are linked and you will find your way, like you will find your way to places where you are still linked, because the actions that you take in relating to one another in one dimension will have an impact on what you do in another dimension. So I think there's two ways to read this. I really enjoy the implication that Hap and Homer and Prairie will never really escape each other because they're intrinsically linked in this way, and it means that it's set up this very kind of interesting kind of cosmic game of cat and mouse between, I guess, the good guy in Prairie and the bad guy in Hap, if you want to be really kind of reductive about it, and what that could mean for the rest of the show. But I also think this idea of like leaving echoes behind being dangerous, I find really fascinating, because I guess the thing that we know about Prairie above all else is that she has an incredibly strong force of will. She's able to kind of will herself to certain places. So if anyone was able to do that, it would be her. And I wonder what it is that's dangerous about it. Whether you could just find yourself in a place so alien to you that your psyche can't deal with it and is suppressed, similarly to how Homer's has been.
Maybe having the anchor of Hap and Homer in the world brings Prairie or the OA out. So maybe if she went to another universe where they weren't there or they didn't have the same link, she would be forever suppressed within someone else's mind.
But yeah, I think it's a really, really fascinating bit of. It's not even really exposition here. It's just kind of like dangling little morsels of what the wider implications of traveling are in front of the Prairie's head. Obviously, the stuff about her having to essentially drown herself to awaken Nina is interesting and plot critical. But I think the broader and very much unanswered questions that Elodie asks here are really the most interesting thing in this scene. Yeah.
Okay. I agree with you. Do you think we'll see Elodie again, or is this all we'll see of her because of the end of the season?
I don't know. I think she's gone. I think she's given Hap something. She's given Prairie something. I think she's off now, and probably would have turned up again, but the road not taken.
Yeah, exactly, and it's kind of like, the obviously she's made it herself, like the analogy to angels. The sort of, and that's in the Bible. There's a lot of angels visiting people to give them information or to inspire them in some way, and that's probably what they're doing with this. This character might never have come back again, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe this character was just sort of to appear to these characters sort of like as an apparition, a vision, like sort of in a biblical text. It would happen,
Yeah, totally. Like I think Elodie and Katoon seemed, if they are indeed the same person or same type of being, seem to exist to guide these main characters towards revelations. So yeah, it's entirely possible that we would have just never seen Elodie again.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We did skip over it, so we'll go back and now and talk about Mo is having a baby.
Yeah. So this is a classic. So I don't want to go back to it too much, but there was a moment in Dark where Ulrich gave over all plot critical information that he holds to another character, and my first thought was
taken off the chessboard, sort of. So
yeah, Ulrich's going to die, or at least be kind of reduced to a side character very soon based on this, because he no longer holds any plot critical information. And as soon as this scene happened with Kareem, I was like, he's giving all his information over to his pregnant ex-girlfriend, and is very clearly frightened of what's coming based on her read of his mentality. So I think at the very least, it is designed to make us think that Kareem is in serious danger. I think it's obvious that he is, because he's messing with very powerful forces now, both physically in terms of Pierre Ruskin, who is clearly willing to kill people who get in his way, and more cosmically, based on his kind of position in the games that are being played here. So I do fear for Kareem as a character. He's lost his kind of moral anchor point with Prairie. I think there's still a good person in there, but his cynicism and his, I guess I don't want to call it recklessness, but but in this episode he's kind of just charging around, not thinking about what he's doing, I think, and that could get him into some trouble, I think.
Yeah, I agree. There's also a moment in this, obviously not, but this isn't really about the show, but she mentioned a woman being there called her doula. Have you ever heard of someone having a doula before? Just out of curiosity?
No, I've never heard of that. I don't know what it is.
Right. Okay. So in America, I learned this whenever we have our first child. When I do something in my life, I want to do 100 hours of research about it just so I know what's going to happen. So I listened to a load of podcasts and everything, and a load of women explaining birth stories and things, so that whenever we got to the point where our children were being born, if something went wrong, I would know, I would have a cool head in the situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sure.
So basically, I was listening to. Also, I just actually care about the fact my wife's pregnant, and I wanted to know, I wanted to know what she was going through. So, so basically, I listen to a lot of podcasts, American podcasts, and a doula is like a birth coach who sort of is your sort of mentor through pregnancy and birth.
Okay.
And it's something that exists in America. It doesn't exist over here. And I maybe think it's maybe like in America, it's a very medical thing, right? Midwives.
I was gonna say, is it like a midwife? Or,
it's not a midwife. It actually, it literally is just like a birth expert, and they sort of talk you through it, your emotional side. But in America, there's not that many midwife births in comparison to just hospital births with doctors. Whereas obviously in the UK and Ireland, it is as like sort of the first stage of it is you have a midwife deliver your baby. If there's medical complications, it can go up to a doctor, but the midwife will still be the one taking care of it. The doctor will come in and just check on you and stuff, right? So, but in America, it's very much like a medical thing. It's not like there's very little midwives. It's something that went away, about 70, 80 years ago. So because of that, there's not the same connection to the person who's going to be delivering your baby. So therefore, in America, I feel like they need this like birth coach doula to have the personal connection. It's not the same as having a midwife. But also
slightly more like emotional.
It's like an emotional support thing, and like sort of they've been through it as well, so they sort of know. And I think in this part of the world as well is that I know like you're from England, so maybe not so much, but in Ireland anyway, like the saying is a community raises a baby. You know what I mean? So like everyone piles in together, and I don't personally believe that like it's so much more rural living in Ireland anyway that the idea of having a doula doesn't really make sense over here. But in America, these huge cities where you move away from your family and you're sort of in the city on your own, and you might not know anyone who's had a child, it makes sense to have this doula who can talk you through things and is there to talk to. Whereas when Emma was pregnant, she has like literally like 12 relatives who she can talk to about it. You know what I mean? So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. I'd never heard of that before, and I had assumed it was like actually, to be honest, my first thought was like, oh, maybe she's bi or something, and the implication here is this because it seems like it doesn't seem like a kind of medical relationship. It's quite a casual. Obviously, they're at home, and they're both dressed quite casually, so it seems like a more casual thing. So I was like, oh, maybe this is like her partner, and she's just kind of dressing it up as something else. But that makes a lot of sense actually for her to be this slightly more kind of like emotional support and medical support as well, obviously. But for her to be filling that role in the birth. Yeah,
and it might also be as well as like this. Unfortunately, there's a lot of aspects of going through pregnancy and like and women's health in general that is seen as taboo for no reason whatsoever, other than it's just women's problems, right?
Women's stuff.
Yeah, so there might also be birthed out of like I know America is like in some like certain parts of America are quite a conservative place. I'm not even talking about politically. I'm just talking about just generally in terms of how they share their lives and things. So maybe that could be a remnant of the fact that. These problems you don't really talk about. So they have like a therapist / doula who they talk about those things to,
Yeah. That's really cool though. I didn't think to look up what a doula was after this, and I'm glad I didn't because I've been educated now.
Yeah, well, Americans, get in touch. I'm sure I got it completely wrong. Just let us know in the comments if I'm right or not. Okay, so we've talked about that. So what about Scott now? Makes it into the house, collapses in the middle.
I didn't understand where he was collapsing, to be honest. Like, I didn't recognise the platform he's on.
Yeah. I don't actually either, to be honest. It looks a bit like, if you're a fan of Lost, it looks like a Dharma Initiative symbol. That's what I know. But I don't think it's connected, Konrad. Don't think it's connected. I
mean, it's all interconnected if our theories about where the third season would have gone are to be believed. That was what I didn't even mention it, but like I'll say it now. Jason Isaacs. I am fairly sure Jason Isaacs has been in Doctor Who. Matt Smith has just been announced as one of the Targaryens in the Game of Thrones spin-off series they're making. So there's your Game of Thrones to the OA link there. So it's two simple steps. So if they had gone into the real world in the third season, they could have popped up to the set where Game of Thrones was being shot, and had Brit Marling show up in Game of Thrones.
We could have actually seen them. I remember 2 miles from my house, my old house in Northern Ireland, is where they had the boat set. It was like a huge boat in the middle of the countryside. Maybe they would have come there. Maybe they would have knocked on the door for a cup of tea.
Yeah, we could have been like, hi, Brit or Bryn.
Yeah, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yeah. All right, okay. So,
but yeah, so sorry, Scott. Like, couple of things here. I'm still not really sure where I land on what has happened to him here. It seems like, from a visual perspective, it seems like the same thing that happened to Elodie and Michelle Vu. I don't know though. I don't know if he's just dead or what has actually happened.
Could it be,
here.
Konrad, that he is not worthy?
Well, yeah, it could be, but I feel like this idea that people are not worthy. Where are they going if they're not worthy?
Yeah,
or are they just being killed? I guess that's where I am at the moment. Like, I don't think Michelle is definitely not dead because of what we see later in this episode, and it seems to me that the what happened to Scott is very similar to what has happened to Michelle, which makes me think, I don't know if that's the worthiness thing, but certainly, they did explicitly say if you're worthy you'll traverse the rose door, and if you're not you'll be in danger.
Yeah,
I don't know what that danger means exactly, but I guess it could be the case for Scott.
Yeah, well, the danger is that Hap will start eating what comes out of your ears.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah,
don't you worry about that, Alice. I've got some thoughts for old Hap.
Old Hunter Aloysius Percy. Okay, so Nina, Prairie, I should say, goes into the bath to go back to her trauma. We get a few visions. She starts drowning herself. She get a few visions of Nina's life. Goes back to before she was Nina. Well, back for actually when they were both Nina, I should say. But and then it sort of rewinds back Prairie's life, and then goes forward in Nina's life, and she learns who she is, and that's I suppose the end of the episode. Then we could just say it now, because it literally is just her waking up. The end of the episode is her like getting up, walking into the mental institution, and then saying, "Tell her Nina Azarova is here," and it was like a real like it meant to be like a,
Yeah, I kind of love her Russian accent. It's very much like hello, like it's sort of like properly leaning into the stereotypical Russian accent.
It was a little more subtle than when she was putting it on as Prairie, but also
yeah, that's true.
She has a thing about her, Brit Marling here, where no matter what accent she does, you can really hear her voice.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the same with Leonardo DiCaprio, right? Like if you listen to him in Blood Diamond, like it's a very caricature-y accent, but you can hear Leo's voice in it. Some actors you can't really, some actors actually disguise their voice fully to the point where they, like Riz Ahmed, for example, his American accent sounds nothing like his actual accent. You know what I mean? To me, anyway. Whereas
I think that's true. Yeah, there's definitely levels of characterization that people put into their accents, and hers, she always kind of pierces through. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for this. Like the Russian, I mean, my read of this from a kind of a slightly meta perspective is that Brit Marling isn't that confident with a Russian accent, which is why we've barely seen her doing her Russian accent in this show. So I'm kind of waiting on tenterhooks to see what it feels like in the final episode, when presumably she will talk Russian lots. But we'll see. Maybe she won't. Maybe she'll switch between.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm sure she'll be able to like come to the fore with either one she wants at that time. Okay, so it's really interesting though, the idea now that she has all of Nina's experiences within her now, because she's like integrated with her. So she knows. Yeah,
I wonder how Nina feels too. Like that's the other thing I wondered. Like, so when Nina is awakened within this body, is there animosity there towards this other person who's in there as well? Like, are they having kind of almost split personality style discussions where it's like,
that's the thing. I don't think so. I don't think it's like, I think the idea of it is, it's okay. This is the best analogy I can make, right? Take a cup of orange juice, take a cup of water, pour them both in a bowl. You don't. Yeah. It's not like the water is separate from the orange juice now. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
they're just together. That's true.
Yeah, there's no separation, which is a shame. I would have liked to have seen like an internal monologue for Prairie, where she's like talking in American and then Russian, and doing the old like talking into a mirror, like like Gollum or like talking to
the camera angle changes and she's different each time. No, but I really do think it's like, you take yellow and blue and you mix it and it becomes green. It's like a new thing, which is very interesting because now Prairie, the character we've been following now, is literally only half of the character we have now.
Yeah, and Nina, it seemed from how we've seen her described, is a very different character to Prairie. So I'll be fascinated to see how this impacts her behavior in the next episode.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So what about old Pierre Ruskin? He's in the pool.
Floating in water, which helps with tinnitus.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Keep going.
Well, I read this as a bit of a red herring. So I might be wrong here, but obviously we've seen people floating in water helping with tinnitus being an implication that they are a traveller. We've seen it with Hap, we've seen it with Elodie. I believe we've at least heard it
they're at the bottom
from
of
people
the pool
as well. Yeah, they are at the bottom of the pool. To me, I think this is implying that he isn't a traveller, but very much wants to be.
Yeah.
Purely because if I try and like logic it out about Pierre Ruskin being a traveller, his goals seem to put him in a position where he hasn't cracked traveling yet. He's basically just got this conveyor belt of kids going into the house to try and crack the Q Symphony game and understand the house. I don't think someone who had already traveled would be investing as much time and money into the house as he is. Obviously it's still interesting, like Hap's still interested in it, but I think there are clearly other ways to get the information that he's after. So yeah, that was my read of this, was that it was kind of saying he wants to travel, but he hasn't managed it yet, and he's kind of infatuated with it.
Yeah, I think I would agree. So basically Kareem wants to know what happened to Michelle Vu. And Pierre says that he said lawyers on it from the start, so he thinks that like kids going into the house, he's gonna have no issue with it. So it's interesting that then Kareem's just like, I don't think that'll hold up, and he's like, well, if it doesn't hold up, then that's all right then,
Yeah.
Which so there's a lot of information given here. Before we get into the actual next scene where we do see Michelle again, I want to say something, right? This whole series, they've had Pierre Ruskin be very mysterious. We've not seen him until this moment. And that, therefore, obviously, a lot of people are theorizing who he could be, right? And if he was someone we'd already met or not. I personally was sort of, when I first watched it, I thought he might, because of the dream she was having, I thought he might end up being BB-8's brother.
Okay.
But obviously, at this point, we don't. Maybe he's someone else in his mind. Who knows? With the show. But the fact that we've never seen him before, and there was so much mystery around him, and he's revealed like this. I actually really like that. I just like that they chose to have the bad guy of this series be really, really mysterious to the point where you just have no idea who he is, and then you finally meet him, and it's all like, whether or not it was successful, that mystery build is all down to the performance of the actor when they come on, and I think he did a really good job. I think he did live up to the billing, in my opinion. I think he ended up being worth the wait for me.
Yeah, and I think as well, I appreciate the fact that some mysterious characters are mysterious because they are reclusive tech billionaires, rather than because they are travelers as well. It means that it keeps you asking questions about characters in the show, because if every time the show was like, oh, who's this character, it was kind of shorthand for, oh, they're going to be a traveler, it would be a lot less interesting. Whereas sometimes people like are just billionaires who are amoral or immoral and don't have much of a public persona. Although I think the implication is that Pierre Ruskin does have a public persona.
But even still, if you were a private detective in San Francisco and you had to go and question Mark Zuckerberg, that would be hard to do.
Yeah, you can't just rock up to Mark's house and be like, "Hey, Mark, let's rap." Like, there's Kareem needs to literally sneak into his home here, and I get the impression that that's probably true of a lot of billionaires. They're very hard to nail down legally. And I think this was a good reveal of his character. I think I really appreciated the kind of duality of it, where he's not presented. He's presented as threatening because obviously Marla Rhodes has been killed. We know that he is dangerous or friends with dangerous people, because he's probably in with the Russian mafia as well. But he's also very mundane. He's just a guy who is floating, trying to understand like what it's like to be a traveler. And also he's very kind of smarmy, you know, when they have this conversation about the cost of learning something or achieving something, they're coming at it from completely different angles. So, you know, Kareem showing that he is still fundamentally a good person is saying, you know, how much does it cost to get to the moon? Like, if like it matters how we got there, or else nothing matters. Which I think is fundamentally the difference between him and Pierre Ruskin, who seems to think the view back at the Earth from the moon is worth any amount of bodies. And that's a, I feel like that's quite a scathing criticism of like big tech in general, to be honest, that it's like, look at what we can achieve, it doesn't matter what it costs to get like society or in actual human lives to get there. So it's and I guess the one thing I would say that is a shame about his character is that it feels like this isn't going to be explored that much. It's going to be very much like he has this opinion and it's bad, and that's all we're going to discuss on it, because we haven't got much time left.
Yeah, Kareem's little pushback on him is probably all we'll get there. In terms of like saying about his sweatshops and stuff, that's probably all we'll get. It's sort of just laying it out to bear, and people can judge him for the evidence. So he leads him into a room where Michelle is there, and Michelle's granny is there too. Yeah.
So I didn't see Michelle being in this house. I definitely did not see her granny being in this house. And I will say this now. I feel like her grandma could have given Kareem a little more information when she. So I mean, this is actually after. I was thinking maybe just do this all as one scene. So. You know, when Kareem was like, but you said she was missing, and her grandma kind of says, yeah, she's not in there, you know, she's somewhere else. I feel like that information could have come at in the first meeting between Kareem. Like, I know where her body is. It's at this reclusive tech billionaire's house. Don't worry about that. We're looking for her consciousness. Like, it's just like, God damn it, grandma.
Yeah, exactly. You know. We've just wasted a week, you know. We've got to the point where we should be starting at. This was crucial information. Why did you not think to share this with me?
But yeah, definitely caught me off guard. I did not see it coming at all.
Yeah. Okay, so Kareem's sort of got a new mission now, and it sort of puts in perspective as well what Prairie was saying was like the problem is you're looking for a body. You know, because the body's been here the whole time, you know?
Yeah, the body's right under your nose, apparently. Like, you just need to speak to her grandma again, and she'll clarify where the body is.
Yeah, it's like, so hang on. Do you want me to find her? Like, physically find her? Oh, no. That's not what I meant,
no.
You know?
It's very mundane. Like, yeah. She just assumed that, you know, he was a competent private detective who could figure out that he was actually looking for her interdimensional consciousness rather than
a
physical
fool.
body.
Like,
what
how
an
did
idiot.
he realise?
Well, I mean, and to be fair, you know, based on what the granny has clearly been exposed to here, you know, Kareem is, and my read of this is that she went to Kareem because of what Pierre Ruskin reveals at the end of this. His face is indelibly linked to what all of these dreamers are seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't really know what to make of that, to be honest. I mean,
what
obviously,
I will say is that the police sketches are better than any police sketches I've ever seen.
Oh, they're amazing. I also just love this idea that Pierre Ruskin put out the call for like the best police sketch artists in the country.
A bit fishy, you know?
Yeah, just like, listen, I need all the police sketch artists you've got. Don't ask any questions. Bring them to San Francisco. They'll be here for a couple of weeks.
I wonder if Gene the Pencil Couché from Making a Murderer was there. That's a callback.
Yeah, he would like to have been. He probably wasn't invited and felt very slighted by the omission. But yeah, I mean, so I guess we obviously know that Kareem is the OA's brother at this point, so he occupies a fairly significant position in this interdimensional narrative, whatever shape that ends up taking. But the fact that they are all drawing him, I don't know where that's going. That's really interesting. That it elevates him. We've seen kind of.
What they say is he's been pulled to the house. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess so. But I mean, it's just interesting that we've seen him characterized as important, but to Prairie's story. You know, he exists to help Prairie achieve her mission, and I think this is the first time that we've seen him kind of positioned as important in his own right to another kind of narrative arc.
Yeah, awesome. And even just because the house is calling him, we've no idea what that means, you know. So you know, it still is very mysterious.
I mean, it's calling him, but it didn't like him being there the last time he was there. So
true. Okay, last thing we'll talk about. It's actually like the third last thing in the episode, but we'll talk about it last. And that is the fact that Scott gets his ear seed grown, and then Hap places it on his tongue in a very loving way. It was sort of glowing as well. It does look like a little bit like an earbud. So, is it too much to say that it was like really hinting at something with him sucking his earphones?
But he just didn't even wash it or anything. He just like
it came straight out
of the ear. Yeah, but it'd been in his ear. It's just like Hap has. Don't put things that have been in other people's ears into your mouth. It's just, but like that's. I don't feel like I have to say this every time Hap is on screen. It's like, stop doing it. Stop doing it, Jason Isaac. All right, it's disgusting.
There wasn't even in the script. He just loves it.
Yeah, they had to rewrite the whole of episode 8 after he did this.
They were like, thank fuck we filmed this chronologically.
Yeah, he did it, and then Britt Marlin was like, I've got an idea. He's giving me an idea, folks.
So he puts it. So anyway, he puts it in his mouth. He gets like a load of voices in his head and stuff, almost as if he can hear a different universe.
Yeah. So I think this to me is a callback to what Ilias was saying to the boys in BBA in the motel. This kind of like, when you're in a place, you can kind of hear or feel the echoes of everyone who is also in that place, and by consuming this plant, he is kind of exposed to it, and it also goes back to this idea that traversing this house kind of exposes you or broadens your mind to the multiverse. So I think way back in when we first saw this seed thing in like episode 2, I mentioned I think it's pineal gland that's mentioned in From Beyond. This kind of like gland in the center of your head that I think the medicine on it is that we don't really know what it's for, and there's some Lovecraftian stuff about how it lets you see beyond the veil of our reality. And that to me is kind of similar to what they're doing here. So by consuming this, he's getting a brief glimpse into the beyond. You know, he's still a bit of like a country bumpkin. You know, he's travelled from one dimension to another, but in terms of like understanding the scope of what he's actually dipping his toes into, he's still an infant. But yeah, this is where that kind of the seed being both a literal thing. It kind of it very much confused me, this, because I was like, oh, the seed is a metaphor, you know, something's been planted in their head that they will never be able to escape. But then Hap goes and just eats it and like is maybe awakened as well, or very briefly catches a glimpse of it.
Yeah.
But either way, ear stuff with Hap. It's a tale as old as time, and I'm going to keep saying it until the character stops doing it. Do not put things in people's ears in your mouth.
Yeah, tale as old as time.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there we go. Well, let's get into the roundup then.
Okay, let's do it.
IMDb rating is 8.8 for this episode, which is called Nina as a Rover, actually. We didn't mention, but yeah, so 8.8.
Yeah, I'd say that's about right. I think, oh, my camera's auto-focusing. Yeah, it's a lot of setup. A lot of cliffhangers, a lot of stuff that's unresolved. I think it does that really, really well. I think I'm very curious to see what happens with Scott and with Kareem and with Pierre and with Nina, and how the boys in BBA are brought into this, if they are at all. So I think kind of narratively it's not that satisfying because barely anything got resolved in this episode, but it's a really good setup for the conclusion of the season.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, before we get into the questions then, do you have any theories coming out of this episode that we haven't discussed?
Let me just I'll run through them just to check that I've ticked them all off, because we've got a bit full disclosure here on the Theory Matrix. So Homer and Hap being the two men aside from Pierre who called on Nina's home, I think is we've already discussed about.
Yeah.
The big one, obviously, there is another universe where Hap is Jason Isaacs and Prairie is Britt Marling, and they are making a show together, which is a ridiculous theory.
That's a big one.
Yeah, I feel like I need to go over that with my partner who hasn't watched the show since the first season and be like, there's another dimension where I think the actors making this show are the main characters. Steve, French, and Jesse are all missing in the San Francisco world, which is why it isn't safe for them to travel. Michelle travelled when she opened the rose window, leaving her body behind. The same thing happened to the engineer. Pierre Ruskin and the Russian mafia had Marlowe killed. I feel like that's a given.
The same thing happened to the engineer. Did you include that in the one theory?
I did.
Jesus,
I did.
Konrad, what are you doing to yourself?
Listen, I write them down as they come to me, alright? There was a lot proved wrong in this episode as well, actually, so we'll see how this all pans out. We'll see how it pans out. And the last one this is a bit of a broad one, but the OA's loss of faith in herself, as predicted by the trees, will come as a result of Kareem abandoning her and Hap compounding the damage in their relationship. So, I don't know. We'll see if that is ever kind of resolved.
Okay. Awesome. Right, let's get into the questions then.
Cool, let's do it.
A stranger from the outside.
If you want to ask Konrad a question, or myself, either way, about the show, the OA, in fact, actually, the next episode, it could be to us both, because after the next episode, we've both seen the whole thing. So,
Yep.
Yeah, questions would technically be for both of us in the next episode. So if you do say for Konrad, I'm going to be a bit personally slighted, guys. So questions underneath the video, or send us to adpodmail@gmail.com. Right, so we've got a few questions this week. First question comes from MH. And MH says, any thoughts on why there's UFO sequenced on Prairie's dress?
UFO sequence on Prairie's
so
dress.
So MH has noticed now. There's a bit of chat here going on with Helen O'Grady and MH saying that maybe they are, maybe they're not. But MH noticed possibly in the pattern of Prairie's dress she was wearing, they looked like there was little UFOs. They might be, they might not be. But MH noticed that.
Well, I mean, she's like an interdimensional time traveler. So I mean, and she has like a spirit guide who lives on Saturn. So at this point, little UFOs are really the least of her concerns, and aren't outside the realm of possibilities.
Yeah, very much not.
So I mean, the idea of like aliens is fairly quaint for where like the Prairie is at the moment in her journey. So maybe it's like wearing like an old retro t-shirt for her. It's like when I wear like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles t-shirt, and it's like, oh, I remember the good old days when we just watched cartoons, and that's what aliens are to her. They're like the good old days before she was worried about trees and angels. And
bitch, I've talked to an octopus and traveled to Saturn in my brain.
Yeah, aliens, whatever.
Yeah. Okay, question from Marvin. So Konrad, last chance to predict the ending. You're never going to predict correctly. Any guesses?
That's harsh. I'm doubling down on my Britt Marling like theory. I think I think the show is going to end with her being sucked into another dimension and it being like the real world. I think that's my guess.
Awesome, great, love that guess. Pep Cool says, greetings, I'm a Konrad for this show, but a question that randomly popped into my head: will we see, or when will we see OA's parents again? Either actual parents, or does anyone know from the second dimension? Well, we know that the actor who plays Abel sadly passed away. So we won't be seeing Abel again. He passed away after shooting his scenes for this season. So did he? Okay. Yeah, so I suppose we might see Nancy again, but I don't know.
They're not really... They've basically been written out of the narrative at this point, so I'd be surprised to see them again. Maybe we get a very brief cutaway and maybe like a montage at the end of the season or something like that, but I can't see them getting any more than that. When there's so much stuff for them to get through in that final episode, that economy of screen time is going to become a concern, I think, and I can't see them giving any to kind of throwaway characters.
Yeah, I agree, but also as we go through, if the show did continue, as you go through the seasons, the more Prairie, or the OA we should say, integrates with other versions of herself, the details of Prairie's life sort of don't matter anymore.
Yeah, like the scope has expanded so far beyond Prairie being kidnapped that it almost doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and last question from Milos Vitten says, Satnam, question for dear Konrad, please. Up to now, we get to know two personalities of OA, Nina and Prairie. And OA led by a messenger, finally manages to integrate these. Does Konrad expect to see a third persona of the OA in the season ending? Well, you kind of already have predicted that.
Yeah, I do think we will see Brit Marling in the season end, but I think it will be a very brief thing. I think OA is going to get sucked into a portal, and then it's going to like curtains are literally going to shut on the entire scene. Or no, actually, you know what they're definitely going to do. They're gonna O's gonna get sucked into a portal, and then you're gonna hear like the old classic and cut, and like someone's gonna bring the clapperboard in, and like her and Jason Isaacs are gonna be like, great scene, Jason, and they're gonna like walk out of a like film lot in Hollywood. That's gonna happen. Classic.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, there we go. Thanks very much for listening, guys. We are the After Dark Podcast. You can find us on YouTube. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you listen to us on audio apps, you can subscribe there as well. If you do listen just on audio apps, because there are a couple of hundred at least of you who just listen on audio apps, if you go over and check out our YouTube channel, there are some there's other content there which you might enjoy as well. More stuff from Konrad, stuff from our friend Emmett, who was on the Best Movie Podcast. Just to remind you as well, coming up soon, we're going to finish the OA, and then after we've done our Theory Matrix / Theories for the Future episode, we're going to be going through Dark with Emmett, one season at a time. We've also I've been talking to Konrad. There's also a Konrad rewatch of Dark in the mix. So we might also be doing some episodes with Konrad where he rewatches season 1 and then rewatches season 2. Because anyone who's a fan of Dark obviously knows it gets better with every rewatch. So I'd love to hear Konrad's thoughts as he goes through the show again. On a season-by-season basis. That might be on the After Dark Podcast, might be on Dark Discussions. We're not sure where the home for that would be yet, but if you subscribe to the Culture Cave, that will be happening too. Any final thoughts, Konrad?
Just join me next week when we reveal that the OA has just been a TV show the whole time, and we're actually in the audience watching that show in a third dimension, which I'm very excited for.
Right, okay, thanks very much, guys, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. The After Dark Podcast has been a Culture Cave production. Please subscribe on audio apps as well as on YouTube at The Culture Cave. Join us next week as Konrad journeys further into the unknown.
Tales old as
Beauty and the Beast.